Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brave New Films presents Racially Charged, America's Misdemeanor Problem, followed by a discussion between Brave New Films' very own Robert Greenwald, founder and president, and Sennett Devermont, activist, Mr. Checkpoint, and founder of Always for the People. Following the film, we will be joined in discussion with these gentlemen to discuss the ways in which they have affected change using the means of documentation to expose racial injustice. It is not lost on us that we are speaking with two cisgendered white men who have chosen this life work in this space. People of color not only have had to deal with inequality, but often have to be the leading voice for change. The reality is, the fight for racial justice involves all of us. And great allies understand that it's critical to center people of color's experience in the fight for both equality and justice. Tonight, we are not having a discussion with two white men to present them as experts, but to highlight their allyship and why it's important that others find and use their points of privilege to advocate for the change they want to see. Tonight's focus is on racial injustice in the criminal legal system. And by showing Racially Charged, we hope you will be inspired to have a screening of your own. It's free and available to the public. The sign-up link will be available throughout the evening and now. Without further ado, we present Racially Charged, America's Misdemeanor Problem, and we'll see you after the film.
Biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor.
To start hearing more and more stories of voter suppression, that broke my heart.
They're the ones that are using the system.
My grandma was fighting for integration back in her day, and I'm fighting for the same thing now.
The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
We're recording.
All right.
Sometimes I feel like my life ended that day.
My car died on the side of the road. A cop walked over to my car and asked me if I needed help, and I said no.
John Clark was convicted on a misdemeanor gambling charge and was forced to work on a chain gang.
I just remember being pushed, like being cornered into a wall.
I was just starting out life.
And I didn't think I had anything to hide.
Mary Gay was sentenced to 30 days, plus court costs for stealing a hat.
I was arrested that evening.
It was a misdemeanor. That was the beginning of the nightmare that I had to go through.
Henry Nelson was arrested for using abusive language in the presence of a female and was sent off to the coal mines.
He said, "You're going to jail." And I'm like, "What for?"
Misdemeanors have historically been the chump change crimes that we didn't pay attention to.
I've done nothing.
Man, I just got beat up by the police last night. I could have lost my life.
13 million. That's about 80% of all American criminal dockets. 80% of what our criminal courts do is misdemeanors.
Got him in cuffs, look. I ain't doing nothing.
The story of misdemeanors is the story of law enforcement continuing to prioritize African Americans, Mexican immigrants, America's so-called criminal class.
You act like I really just committed a serious crime.
You did do something illegal. You crossed the crosswalk.
You might see 2 or 3 police standing here waiting for you.
The cops will jump out of the van anytime, anywhere.
That's what I was joking.
The misdemeanor system has not gotten its fair share of blame. Misdemeanors are the invidious first step in the racialization of crime in this country.
Too often, arrests for minor crimes devolve into police violence and death for Black and brown people.
for jaywalking.
Not wearing a seatbelt.
My tail light was out.
I was arrested for being home. Driving with a suspended license. My license got suspended because I didn't know I had
I was drunk, and I was for this. They claimed that I was in
I was $744 fine because I couldn't pay
And how far back that goes is a really dark story. Reconstruction was an era when 4 million African Americans made it out of bondage and were able to achieve at really high levels, whether it was in business, in education, different ways of prosperity that really threatened white supremacy.
They elected many black men to positions of power. Of course, that was a sea change from how power had been exercised during slavery, and a lot of white folks just didn't like it. They were nostalgic for the old days of overt white supremacy, and so they subverted Reconstruction.
If you look at misdemeanors and you track them from the Reconstruction era to modern day, you see the fingerprints everywhere of white supremacy and control of black bodies.
The landowners, they had nearly lost everything. And the only way to get that back is to somehow corral the black labor force back onto the same plantations that they had once worked.
The most effective way of forcing African Americans back into this condition that would be so similar to slavery was to begin to criminalize black life itself.
Misdemeanor offenses for incredibly trivial or made-up things, what should have been tiny penalties for non-existent offenses, turn into years of people's lives.
Where were you taken? I was taken out to the camps. Where did you sleep? Slept on some hay. Chain was on me.
I'm being put into handcuffs. I'm being dragged into this cold space. I don't have anything to cover myself. And I'm asked to sit inside of this tiny little room, and I have no idea why I'm there.
Was there any jury that tried you? No, sir. Did the recorder ask you whether you wanted a lawyer? No, sir.
And I thought that I would have time to talk to a court-appointed attorney so we could talk about what happened. I could ask them to get other, pieces of evidence that would prove that, hey, I'm poor. It wasn't like I was trying to run off with this money.
Did they furnish any copy of the charge against you? No, sir, they did not. Did they give you any opportunity to plead to any accusation? They never gave me anything at all.
When they asked me how I pled no contest. I didn't understand that no contest is the same as guilty, and that I would walk away with a misdemeanor that would affect my ability to get hired.
The justice system after emancipation was weaponized against Black people. It perpetuated slavery by making the mechanisms of enslavement pretty much the same. Family separation, backbreaking labor, people having no rights. You could be sold on the steps of the courthouse that you were convicted in and given to the highest bidder.
A whole separate criminal code that applied to African Americans was established.
Many misdemeanor offenses are best understood as mechanisms of social control. They're not designed to catch dangerous or guilty people, but rather they are tools. We give them to police as additional ways of exercising their authority.
Some of these laws were overtly race-based, and with others then and now, the understanding was that the laws would look race-neutral, but they would be applied and enforced almost exclusively against Black people.
For these governments to sell prisoners into slavery, you first have to arrest lots of people. There's a big problem with that, though. There's just not enough crime for this system to work and for it to be profitable. The state governments of the South had to invent new crimes.
Southern legislatures, which are essentially run by Confederates at that time, are trying to reinscribe a form of slavery through a system of laws called Black Codes.
a whole category of new statutes passed in almost every southern state that attached these enormous penalties to what were in reality very minor thefts. Those were laws, and many others like it, that were only ever enforced against African Americans. And so it became a way to have a basis for arresting huge numbers of black people.
I don't remember much about writing the check.
John Owen was caught taking 6 ears of corn from a cornfield and was arrested under the black codes.
This is $4, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times 4 is $28. So just this pile right here is how much I went to jail for.
Owen was put in jail for months until he was finally tried for theft.
I have a theft charge. It's theft by check.
I had money in the bank, but I didn't know how long it took for checks to process. Like, I know better now. I could have donated plasma, gotten $25.
Under his sentence, Owen was leased into convict labor and sent to the chain gang, where he served 2 years for the corn and a 3rd year for the court costs.
I was in the Hays County Jail for a total of 45 days for $25 worth of food.
Michael Brown, who was the teenager who was killed by police in Ferguson, whose death led to the explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement, he was stopped for jaywalking. He stepped off the sidewalk and was walking in the street, and there was a local criminal ordinance that made it a crime to do so. African Americans are being cited for jaywalking at 3, 5, 10 times the rate of white pedestrians.
The legislatures of the white South make it a crime to walk alongside a railroad. In an era in which there are no paved roads, the easiest way for a poor person to get from one place to another is to walk alongside a railroad. That law didn't say this only applies to black people, but those were laws that were only ever enforced against African Americans.
All of us engage in what would be considered to be minor crimes. And for some people, it's crossing the street at the wrong time. But if you're black or brown, then it becomes categorized as something that's criminal.
So what is I doing?
Didn't use a crosswalk.
All I'm trying to do is go home, man. I'm tired. I just got off of work.
Nandi Kane says he was walking home from work when it happened.
I felt like they were gonna draw a gun out and shoot me in my back.
I'm tired of all this shit, man.
Vagrancy laws were passed that essentially meant any black person who was found on the streets unemployed and couldn't show evidence of work was a criminal, a vagrant.
Trespass laws originate from this idea that African Americans only belong in certain spaces and at certain times. And so they give police officers the ability, under the guise of law, to dictate where an African American person can be, what time they can be there, and how they can operate in certain spaces.
My kid's daycare was inside of one of the buildings to the Skyway, so I figured I'd take a walk, find somewhere to sit down, and wait on them to get there.
I'm going to New Horizons to pick up my kids. I was sitting there for 10 minutes.
Monroe Dolphus was standing in the train yard when he was grabbed by the sheriff's deputy. Monroe stated that he had not committed any crime.
Wait. You're gonna go to jail. I'm not doing anything wrong. Hold on. Can you please? No, come on, brother. Can you please? This is assault.
At this moment, I saw my children's daycare class and their teachers and everything walking past while this was happening. He took the taser and drove it into my leg, and pretty much at that point, lost all control of the leg.
The deputy later claimed that the crime committed by Dolphus was taking a 25-cent tin of fish from the lunch pail of a Southern Railway worker. Unable to provide any evidence to support this, the charge was changed to vagrancy.
And I kept asking them what I was being charged with. They'll create false charges just to make sure that everything is perpetuated.
Judge Longshore found Dolphus guilty of misdemeanor vagrancy and sentenced him to 5 months and 20 days of hard labor in the mines of Tennessee, coal, iron, and railroad.
Going back to the vagrancy laws of the late 19th century, the people who make those laws have in mind another group of people for whom there is an inherent threat to their livelihood, like breaking barbecue ordinances in public parks or sleeping in dormitories that white people don't think you live there.
I have every right to call the police.
It allows law enforcement to regulate whether or not certain behavior for one group of people is deemed criminal and another group of people is just frivolous activity.
Many people remember the Starbucks debacle in Philadelphia. There were two African-American men at a Starbucks. The employee had them arrested for loitering where they're clearly not engaging in that behavior.
What did they get called for? Because there are two black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes, I didn't know.
Loitering is a police tool of choice. It's the go-to offense that police often use to impose their authority. In the misdemeanor system, there is no conduct too minor, no act too small that the state cannot render a crime.
Black people charged with a misdemeanor are 75% more likely to be locked up than white people. You have to realize that these laws didn't happen by chance. They were part of a system to continue to oppress black bodies.
Our misdemeanor system includes all kinds of offenses, and some of them can be quite serious. Domestic violence, DUI, but most of the time, we treat minor, harmless conduct as misdemeanors. Traffic offenses, jaywalking, order maintenance offenses, spitting, driving on a suspended license for failure to pay a fine. And yet, these minor, meaningless misdemeanors can have terrible consequences for individuals. To understand the misdemeanor system, follow the money.
The accused are paying for the judges, the prosecutors, and the public
They made more
defenders.
than $3.5 million off phone commissary at the jail. It's a known moneymaker.
They call it the $20 ad.
I'm a family member, transfers money in JPEG.
Pocketing leftover money from the inmates'
about
food budgets.
$2,000 a month in e-cig
They are a
sales.
controversial food vendor with a
Rampant
big
fraud,
state contract.
waste, and
Tonight,
abuse.
Aramark is
The
in
company
spotlight.
that uses inmate workers.
Today's system is estimated at $80 billion. The misdemeanor side of it is a way of saddling people with fines and fees that will put money in the pockets of the administrators of that system.
The first time I got a ticket, my insurance had lapsed. So I got the speeding ticket and I got a no insurance ticket at the same time. The next time I got pulled over, I was arrested for driving with a suspended license. I paid the tickets, paid the court costs, paid my fees and fines, but they said for driving with a suspended license, the punishment for that is we're going to suspend your license for 2 years. I would often have to choose between paying my inspection or my registration or paying my light bill or other bills that I had. I had to drive my car to get to work because I had a construction job. If I needed to take material to the job, I couldn't take plywood or 2x4s on a bus.
I felt like there was no way I was gonna be able to take care of the kids on my own while you were out because I didn't know how long you were gonna be in jail.
This officer saw me, a young Hispanic guy, driving a 63 Impala and said, you know what, that guy, he's up to something. I was trying to go to work, trying to pay bills, and he's treating me like a hardened criminal. That misdemeanor charge ended up becoming something that I couldn't get rid of.
They are being treated as revenue sources, charged daily fees for being in jail, supervision fees, tether fees, drug testing fees, database fees to fund bail bondsmen, private probation companies, electronic monitoring companies, drug testing companies. It is disturbingly similar to the way that we saw African Americans being exploited in the post-war South.
Let's go in! Let's go in!
I'm DeMario Davis, linebacker for the New Orleans Saints. I was born and raised in Mississippi, pretty much raised by a single mom. Entering into my second year of college, me and a teammate were caught shoplifting groceries from Walmart. It kind of felt a lot more like a drug bust than us having stole some groceries. The bail was set at $10,000, and I didn't have $10,000. The football coaches bailed us out. A misdemeanor, you're supposed to be able to be in front of the judge within 90 days. But this is not happening. This is not happening in our country. We have people who are spending 7, 8 months in jail who have not even been sentenced.
Cop arrested me and I was charged with the misdemeanor.
The term chain gang was coined on account of the shackle worn by convict laborers.
They said, okay, listen, we're gonna let you go home now. But Scram's gonna come and put a monitor on you.
They were taken to an anvil, where a rivet was pounded into the ankle cuffs to keep them closed. Then the cuffs were chained together.
The initial fee to get on the Scram was $250. That's just to have it put on. Then after that, they charged me $220 a month for the actual monitor.
Many of the convicts suffered from shackle sores, ulcers where the iron ground against their skin. Gangrene and other infections were also common.
Right after they put it on me, you start causing these really severe sores and rashes. And their attitude pretty much is, it's court ordered, it's by a judge, and you'll wear it, or you can go back to jail.
The emaciated convict laborers worked their entire days barefoot, but the shackles were always on their ankles. They mined in them, slept in them, and those who died of disease or beatings were buried in them.
What they're doing is unjust. What they're doing is profiteering, because you're paying them. You're their slave with their shackle on your foot.
I remember this hopeless feeling just overcome me. I couldn't take care of my family.
The biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor. The full consequences of getting a misdemeanor can be astronomical.
It hurt me for 10 years, and it completely disrupted my life. And I have been trying to figure out how to get my life back on track. This will be a part of my story for the rest of my life.
When people are booked into jails for a week or a year or even a day, you just cannot avoid the trauma that's inflicted upon you. The moment you hit the jail, you don't come out of that unchanged or untouched. You witness trauma, you witness violence, and it changes you. It changes your community.
I tried to get a job at Amazon where my roommate worked. I called to Walmart and I called to several other retail stores. I got turned away because I had a misdemeanor charge for theft.
Not enough people talk about what it means to have a misdemeanor on your record. It can determine the kind of job that you get, to the kind of housing that you can qualify for, to the kind of schools that you can go to. A lot of people are harmed for life because of the smallest infractions.
They're being rendered homeless. They're going without food, without medication. Their children are suffering.
Due to misdemeanors, I lost my housing. Shortly after that, I lost my vehicle, which led to me losing my job. And it was just one thing after another, like kicks to the face. I had full custody of my children. They had to get to school. We had to sleep in the car, waking up at like 4 a.m, getting to a laundromat to make sure that they have clean school uniforms.
I had worked so hard and all of that was ruined by one charge. One misdemeanor ruined my ability to get even just basic work.
They can't get a job if they have to check a box that says they've been convicted of a crime. They can't even rent housing because they got poor credit when they received a ridiculous $500 speeding violation. So this system was designed both to extract from people, but also to marginalize their presence in society.
It's finna be a mass grave site.
This is the dormitory. The stupid crowd, these are the beds. They right beside each other, and this is the space.
Everybody just dying and getting sick and shit. Like, this shit serious as fuck. Bro, you alright? You want me to go get the police?
No.
What have you done this bitch?
You ain't gonna do nothing about it.
This motherfucker literally in this bitch dying, bro. I don't know what to do.
One of the worst places to be during this pandemic is locked up in jail.
The judge never said, I'm sending you to prison to die.
The same horror story is emerging of the unchecked spread of infection and inmates essentially being left to die.
Now, jaywalking or theft of a small amount or any sort of vagrancy type of behavior can lead to your incarceration and eventual contracting of the virus and death.
I've been in jail for 2.5 months for petty theft, a nonviolent crime that carries a misdemeanor charge for the price value of less than $100. There's been 3 deaths, 2 being inmates, 1 being a guard. As far as like people who are working for the facility, they're like intertwined. They could easily be catching it. That's how one of the guards caught it. My life is in danger.
These human beings aren't valued enough for us to apply the same kinds of safety measures there that we are in other sectors of society. If it wasn't already bad enough that you are booked into jail because you didn't have the money to pay the ticket and your license is suspended, that is now life-threatening to you.
Sheriff's Office is now releasing non-violent inmates as a next step in mitigating the spread of COVID-19.
Hundreds of inmates have been released from Shelby County's jail in an effort to put fewer people at risk for coronavirus. 600 inmates.
A total of 38 inmates are ordered to leave.
They were inmates.
Now they're freed people.
Because of COVID-19, thousands of misdemeanor defendants are rightly being released. It's clear that these individuals should have never been incarcerated in the first place. We can tell by the fact that after these releases, we haven't seen any sort of crime wave. There's a different type of crime wave that should concern us, though, and that's the crime of violence against Black people post-Civil War.
State violence has historically been used to intimidate people of color, especially Black people. We see this all throughout history.
Misdemeanors, they have almost nothing to do with public safety. What misdemeanors do is give police an extraordinary amount of discretion with any minor offense premised on the idea that the Black man is a threat.
Misdemeanors are a very specific mechanism that legalize violence toward Black people and keep them in a very particular place, not just as individuals, but as an entire community of people.
When we look at so many cases in history, often what started as an investigation or a claim of a petty misdemeanor offense led to police officer-supported and sanctioned racial terrorism.
All too often, we see police exercising that terrible authority of violence against people who have only been suspected of the most minor of crime.
The problem isn't bad apple cops. The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
police shot this boy outside my apartment. They killed him.
Hey, bro! You move, I swear to God! Hey, boss! Hey,
I just did pretty. That's all. I'm so sorry. I have no gun.
Gray appeared to be unable to walk and was screaming as he was carried, feet dragging on the ground, to a police van.
I know, you just doing your job.
Mama! They gonna kill me, man. I can't breathe. Please, you need my nigga. I can't breathe, officer. Please.
My life could have so easily been taken in that Skyway. George Floyd goes to show further that the most minor of offenses, even no offense at all, could result in death.
The very purpose of racial terrorism is control, is social control.
What we have seen in the killings of those accused was that misdemeanors became the gateway for police violence and murder.
We are seeing decriminalization. We are seeing citations instead of arrests. We are seeing people let out of jail. We are seeing pushback against fines and fees. But at the same time, there is so much more work that needs to be done.
Who defined what a misdemeanor is? The whole thing was built on exploitation, on racial violence, on building up industrial capitalism.
We should not be locking up people who speed, who are too poor to pay a fine or a fee, who loiter or trespass or jaywalk. They're not dangerous, they're not scary.
There's never been a good reason to lock up anybody for petty offenses. Like slavery back in the day, the law itself is doing the work of oppression. The criminal law is providing the authority to arrest Black people, to punish Black people, to kill Black people. And ultimately, the real crime is that we're Black.
When officers use their discretion and still choose to arrest low-level offenders instead of citing and releasing them, they are choosing to lock a human into a cage we wouldn't even put our dogs in.
We got 123 people out of the Hayes County Jail yesterday.
It eliminated the penalty for being caught driving with a suspended license from another 2-year suspension to a 90-day suspension.
Don't allow the outside world to corrupt you. Don't allow the outside world to tell you who you are.
I wanted to be a voice for those who are not able to be a voice for themselves.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. Powerful, powerful, powerful film. Thank you so much again, Sennett, for joining us. Mr. Checkpoint, Robert Greenwald, president and founder of Brave New Films. Gentlemen, let's just jump right into the question. So, Robert, your documentation of injustice has been through filmmaking, and then Sennett, yours has been through social media. So there's been this so we have one generation on the call and then another generation on the call. So can each of you just share what led you to this particular medium that you have? Robert, let's start with you.
Was in theater. I grew up in New York and was surrounded by live theater, and that's where I started. When I moved to Los Angeles, it was to work in theater at the Mark Taper Forum. But once I got to Los Angeles, like many people, I was bitten by the bug. I saw movies all around and television all around, and it was another form of storytelling. And for many years, I worked in commercial film and TV. And then at a certain point, I was able to make this transition to doing social justice films, documentaries, long, short, and everything in between. And I know how not to do a lot of things that I can't do, but what I have learned and what I've always done over the many years have been tell stories in theater, in commercial television, commercial features. And now I'm really fortunate enough to be able to use that skill set for films, social justice work, documentaries, and making them available to large audiences all around the country, and to many of you who are watching it tonight, who I hope will make sure that you also host a screening.
Thank you, Robert. And Sennett.
Well, I want to say just thank you so much for having me here. I'm a big fan of Robert, a big fan of Brave New Films. I've just loved a lot of the work that you have put out. So humbled to be here. How did I get started in social media? I guess for me, it really came to actually watching the news and seeing and learning about DUI checkpoints. And when I found that they were being used to target a certain group of people, particularly Hispanics in Chula Vista and Escondido, the news investigation was pretty detailed. And I thought I would start using Twitter back in 2011 to tell people where these checkpoints were. And we accompany that with information of like, here's your rights, here's the laws. I started filming the police because I ended up having an interaction with the police that I just couldn't believe. So I would always personally film, and that resulted one night for me spending the night in jail. And when I was able to get out, I used my footage to sue the police, to have my innocence, to show my innocence. And that lawsuit, combined with putting it on YouTube, it made me want to tell people to film the police, because people would say, this happened to me. This, the cops lied. I ended up in jail. I'd say, did you film it? It was typically a no. So I encourage people to film police. And social media was just the only available medium that I had to actually share this stuff, that was free. And I could, share it to a particular, the public, I should say.
Great. Awesome. So in doing this work, questions to both of you all. So what have been some challenges that you faced while exposing injustice?
Well, the challenges that I have faced, other than when I went to Afghanistan and Pakistan to film drone survivors and to film people who are opposed to our war in Afghanistan, were for the most part not physical danger. In those countries, it was real physical danger about being kidnapped or held hostage or other things. Most of the danger has been either idiots in Fox News attacking me, certain number of death threats. When we did the NRA, we got a lot of threats. But let's be clear, the challenges and the threats are nothing in compared to the people who live this day in and day out. The systemic racism that allows so much of this to go on, as you saw in the film, as you saw in our voting suppression and sabotage film, and in many others, are something that I can observe, that I can feel, but I am not subjected to it. And that gives me an extraordinary freedom to do things that I otherwise would not be able to do.
Absolutely. Sennett, you're a different medium than Robert. I mean, you're kind of immediate, on the go. Social media is like right now. So what have you faced in your journey in doing this work?
So I want to agree with Robert as well, though, that although I am out there filming the police, with my phone. So yeah, I've spent the night in jail for filming. I've been put in handcuffs, harassed, death threats, all of this stuff. But, as Robert mentioned, I've put myself in those situations because I'm pretty confrontational. I'm wanting to expose what's going on. And make no mistake that me, in these certain instances, it's not like, I live it. In fact, when I get pulled over, I've had instances where I've had to say nothing to the officer. I've had the ID ready, they give me the ticket, and I've left without having to answer any questions because none were even asked. These aren't situations that most Black or brown people have ever experienced. And so there's certainly a difference. But when you are sharing a video of an officer doing something wrong and then having people, send emails saying you should be fired. Well, that officer typically has a family, has friends, has, coworkers that are not happy with that. And so does it build some tension and all of this adversity? Absolutely. But, I feel safe just doing, in the public at any times being pulled over. I don't have that fear. And so, yeah, I think that's important to acknowledge.
Absolutely. So you all just both mentioned the privilege that you have in being able to do this work. So answer us this. So when you started, has anything changed in your knowledge of that privilege to now? And how has that affected your approach to the work?
Well, for me, I think that what has changed is the systemic nature of the problems have only gotten stronger and in some ways more apparent. And I think that while systemic racism, injustice, and inequality is, of course, horrific. The fact that it's more apparent to more people is a perverse kind of progress, because you need to shine a light on it in order to begin the process of change. So I've become very aware of how long the fight is, how tough the fight is, how important the fight is, and the ability to stay in it for the long haul. On virtually every film that we've done and every campaign, whether it was drones or the NRA or the Koch brothers or racial justice, over and over again, our opposition will say, oh, you guys come and go when you're upset about a shooting or something bad, and then you're gone. But we, the NRA, or we, the corporatists, or we, the people who are exploiting it, we're in it for the long haul. And I would say, to me, that's maybe one of the most important things I've learned, and that I try to think about how to be most effective in the long battle, not in, oh, I'm mad, I'm pissed off today, I'll send an email or I'll sign a petition.
Thank you, Robert. Sennett, what about you? Any insights from when you started versus now?
Yeah, definitely. When I started, I wanted to be optimistic that I just had a total different sense than I did today, truly. I was optimistic that there was ways to work with the police and do these different things to make kind of this reform and change. Body cameras are positive, community policing, all these different kind of things. But the reality, and when I started always film the police, I'm sharing all these videos, and then we see all these videos. People tell me, and we want to believe it's not possible police would still do this, right? I mean, come on, they know now we're filming. But the reality is, last year was the deadliest year of police to people since it's been documented in 2014. It could have been deadlier before, but since we've been documenting it in 2014, last year was the deadliest. So is it getting better? Absolutely not. Is the reform working? It doesn't seem to be. My perception and thought of it all has definitely changed. And I feel like I've gotten more aggressive and showing different things. I show now police just kind of standing around all of the time. I used to not think there was anything to that, but the reality is, as Robert mentioned, we've only been seen in media, besides the stuff he's produced for the most part, we've only seen in media for cops, like the show Cops, and others, for example, of cops really doing stuff all the time, solving crime, chasing people. Well, that's not a reality. Most cops, most of the time, aren't doing that. And so now I'm actually just kind of sharing different things, telling them to leave, and kind of being more confrontational as it's come, because I don't think they're needed. I think it's not more training, it's not more reform, it's not more funding. We need a whole nother service, and it's not them.
For sure. Absolutely. 100% agree. So let's moving back into the ally space. So oftentimes navigating the work here in the social justice space is a delicate balance for a white ally, because you want to make sure that voices are heard and justice is served while not crossing the line into the white savior cliche. So can you all expand on how you've been able to do that and to be successful at what you've done?
Well, I think for me, is whether I've been successful will probably take another 100 years to determine or not. But I also think that if you come from New York City, given that you get beaten up pretty good on the way up, the notion of being a savior is way out of my sight lines. What I'm focused on is saving myself or my family or what is going on day to day. But I also think it's very important that people understand our goal with the social movement, whatever the issue, racial justice, women's rights, anti-war movement, the labor movement, has to be to expand our allies. It cannot be to keep shrinking with a purity test. Was the T crossed in exactly the right place? It wasn't, you're out of here. And what our job, I believe, all of our jobs, is how do we, without selling out our values, without compromising, but how do we keep expanding in all ways, whether, social movement or electoral, how do we keep expanding? The way to failure is to make sure that we are divided, to make sure that while white allies or brown allies or gay allies are not all part of the coalition, then we are literally screwed.
Thank you, Robert. Great way to put that. Sennett?
I agree. I mean, the biggest threat is unity, right? I mean, Chairman Fred Hampton was assassinated. His whole, besides chairman of the Black Panther Party, it was the Rainbow Coalition, right? Bringing everybody together. And, for me personally, I've stayed focused. It's like, I know what makes me able to share what it is. I come from a family of lawyers. I know certain rights. I've used social media to share that stuff. It doesn't matter who it could help. If it helps people, amazing. And, for me, it's been an interesting thing because I've been doing this over 10 years. So before George Floyd, filming the police nearly anywhere is pretty controversial. Why are you doing that? Even people who no one could understand why you're really always filming the police unless you've been affected. If you've been affected, no one's, listening to you, unfortunately, right? And it's like, oh, you're just, the police. No one wants to go against them, especially before them or question that they could do wrong. So for me, it's just been focused on the mission of what can I do? What can I share? And not really letting any of the distractions, especially within the movement of people who want the same thing or perceive to, get in the way.
Very cool. And so our next question in terms of allyship is, well, how do we bring more people with privilege into the space of advocating for racial justice?
Man, I wish I knew the answer to that one. I think it's tough. I mean, so we started Brave New Films with the premise, the assumption, because film is different than other mediums,
right,
that first you reach the heart and then you reach the brain. Many people on our side start with the brain, a PowerPoint, an analysis, a white paper, all of which is valid. Our job is different. If we can get people to feel, to be empathetic or sympathetic or connected, I think there's a chance to move them to activism or at least to support. But again, it's a long haul. It's not short. And if you look at it, it's a movement, not a moment. Then where are you going to be? All of you watching tonight and others who've watched, where are you going to be? And what are you going to do in order to make sure that you bring others in? The beauty of the films and that being a nonprofit and also the work that, of course, Sennett is doing is that we have these things and we could reach tons of people that we couldn't reach before. I remember when someone walked into my office years ago and said, hey, there's this new thing called YouTube and we can put our films up on YouTube and it's free. I said, wow, we don't have to pay for storage or placement anymore. So this is, obviously there's many bad things, but this is an opportunity for us to reach people at a level we've never reached them before. And we have to be smart and strategic and figure out how do we do it? When do we do it? And therefore focusing.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. And so what I'm hearing you say is basically we have these films, we have these tools, we have lots of proof. Let's have people watch them and have conversations with their friends and family members about their role in racial justice and equality. Sennett, do you have anything to add there?
I agree. We got to inject these issues, and from, you know, ideally getting the celebrities talking about it. It's in the Hollywood movies, it's in documentaries, it's shared throughout social media, you know, and people, again, we all have the phone. So you see police, you can film them from a safe distance. You can upload it, and you can look into this stuff. So it's all at our fingertips. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Great. One more question before we actually turn it to anybody in the texts, and by the text I mean the comment section. So saying that you all are bringing folks in, exposing these things, we know it's a challenge, but how have you personally witnessed the positive effect of the work that you do?
I guess for me, it has been just today. I was talking with someone who was running a magazine, and he said he comes from a labor background. He said he was a labor organizer, and he remembers showing the Walmart film outside Chicago when they were organizing to stop Walmart for coming in. And over months of organizing, it's never the film alone, months of organizing, they were able to ultimately help stop Walmart from coming in. So it's stories like that, for me, that are the fuel and the drug and the inspiration to keep doing it day after day, week after week, month after month. Because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you don't know if you're having an effect. You know, we're all human beings. We have questions and doubts and dark days. Not every day is positive. And it's the experience when hearing from people who've seen the films, who've been affected, and hopefully, like many of you watching today, will take action. And Carmen, in running the screening program, you've been getting amazing comments from people. To throw the spotlight on you for a minute, tell us about that and how that is, how you're feeling about your work in arranging the screenings and then hearing from people.
Sure. I mean, it's great to hear from folks, especially after they've watched the film, how they are taking action and how it impacted and educated them on the issues. And we've got folks, League of Women Voters, huge supporters, Unitarian Universalists, huge supporters. And these folks literally make it their mission to spread the word like a gospel. And it's excellent. And we are able to continue to offer our films for free because of that. And it's phenomenal. So people are being reached. But like you said, it's hard to quantify so much in terms of the effect. But we know we are having some effect through the feedback that we're getting. And it is a wonderful thing. So Sennett, what about you? I know you're a little bit more in your face every day. So any kind of feedback there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the first time when someone said, "Hey, here's a video." I saw the police started filming. They sent it. I shared it, and I then get a message saying, "That's me in the video." I'm being charged with all these things, resisting arrest, and in the video he's walking back like this. They let the dogs on him, and that was the first time when it had gone full circle. Since then, that's happened too many times. That's the reality. In fact, in Beverly Hills, I once got a tweet and it said, "I'm being racially profiled in Beverly Hills. I live there. I'm Black and I'm being stopped all the time." I had a phone call with this gentleman, and soon enough, I started, sharing that could be happening. I started getting footage, and that exact same thing happened where the people in the footage reached out. And right now, there's a current class action lawsuit with the biggest civil rights attorney in the country, Benjamin Crump, who's leading this lawsuits. With the numbers are something like out of 107 stops, 99 of the people were Black, and so this is something where after years of getting some information, we've been able to activate the community, people that work in Beverly Hills who saw it, heard about it. Anytime they see now someone stop, they send footage. And it really goes to show how much the community can make this kind of change. And everyone and so many people are needed in that process. So
for sure. So what you're saying is literally you've gotten to a point where people know to contact you, you'll blast it out, and somebody will be there to assist what's happening in the moment. Or
that's happens, a handful of times. I mean, in Beverly Hills specifically, I don't live too far enough where I can get to some of these situations actually in real time. When you're providing this type of exposure at this level, you start really, you're able to connect dots fast. And Beverly Hills is just one small, one department, but in my opinion, it's internationally recognized, right? It's like if there could be funny business going on there, you could imagine what's going on elsewhere. So I've tried to really keep the magnifying glass to them, and sure enough, there's definitely some more investigating to do. So that's actively going on.
For sure. And social media has certainly changed. Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Just before you open it up to the audience, I just wanted to ask Sennett, what is it that people watching and others can do to help and support your very important and very gutsy work?
I appreciate that. On Instagram, our Instagram account for the nonprofit is Always For the People, but our website is aftpfoundation.com. In terms of what can people do, contributions, financial contributions are very appreciated. We're doing traveling around the country to, stand in support with families that have been done wrong by these different injustices. And I will say that I want to make sure that to remind us all, and something is jury duty. If we do happen to get summoned, if we know someone who gets summoned, if they're having the conversation of, oh, how do I get out of it? Or there's someone who says or believes in, the type of defund the police, it's not about, telling the judge that and being excited because you got told to get home. The goal is say less, get in the seat. Nothing that you've previously experienced will, alter your judgment or your opinion or the facts, and try to be the 1 in 12 that can forever impact someone's life in your community. That's the goal, and something we should all really strive to do and share, promote, and talk about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we've also put the link to the website in the chat. So if you weren't able to capture that, it's there. So we've got a really good question in the chat. And, feel free to answer, folks, as you see fit. I'm going to put it on the screen here. Hannah Inc. has asked a great question. How much activism will it take to break the corporate hold on the profit motive of incarceration/slavery? Robert, I can't wait to hear from you.
Wow. Well, thank you, Hannah. That's a hell of a question. Unfortunately, with activism, it's hard to measure it and it's hard to quantify it. What we know is that if you follow the money, going way back to today, money and power are not going to go quietly into the night. They are tough, they are brutal, they are ruthless, and we can only stand toe-to-toe and fight that fight with all the tools we have available. I don't know how much it requires. I just know it requires everybody who's watched the film, everybody who's seen Sennett's work, committing to something. You don't have to stop your life and become Gandhi, which would be nice, but will you commit an hour a day, an hour a week, something towards the end goal of breaking the corporate hold, breaking the profit motive, and exposing corporate capitalism at its worst?
Thank you. Sennett, did you have any ideas?
It's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, what's the tough thing is, being in this fight of trying to combat any injustice, right? It's to think there. It's. I think the goal is you just have to take it step by step. What can you do, and then and keep doing that. It's tough, and it's not. I wish that was an answer, because if that had an answer, I think then we could figure it out a lot faster, right? To quantify this kind of issue. But as Robert said, follow the money typically goes to wherever is allowing all this to happen. So if we can watch where we spend our money, that is certainly helps with these issues, see how our money affects these issues and things like that.
Cool. Thank you. We've got another question in the chat here. Here we go. Oh, is the presentation going to be available afterwards? Yes, it will be. We're gonna send it out to everyone who RSVP'd. So this is less of a question and more of a comment that I hope you all can maybe expand on. When we talked about privilege and folks that want to join in and feel that they are, I'm going to just actually put it up on the screen because this user has actually has a good point. Pilamy asks, connecting those with privilege to the methods of oppression may make some to become aware. Others believe that they are already there, but are closed to hear these messages. From folks who are in communities with the most privilege, Robert and Sennett, how, especially on this last part here, how can we open the eyes of folks to hear the messages that think they're already there? And before you answer, Sennett, do you have any experience? I want to, especially Sennett, have you experienced anybody's changed mind or opened mind as a result of the work that you do? And what was it that you think that changed and opened up their mind?
What comes to mind is like the children of these people. I've had the convos, or I've gotten the messages that say, my dad is a prosecutor, or my dad's an officer. And at the dinner table, I'm showing these videos and I'm asking him to respond and what his thoughts are. And they're having internal issues on how their parent or loved one is responding in that capacity. The reason I mention that is because I think those are going to be if there's going to be a change, I think it's probably going to be in those moments of, maybe it's for the kid, right? Maybe it's that kid that was actually just going to go and believe everything Pop said or whatever it was. And now it's kind of like waking up to seeing these realities. I don't have a specific one, because unfortunately, a lot of people who I think are against systems of oppression, they benefit off it, right? And they don't want to mess up their life. And a lot of people think that for their others to have more rights, they might lose some of theirs. So there's a misconception, I believe, of equality. And it will take, I think maybe it's the future is the children, right? And so maybe to a degree it's them, and they are seeing this stuff through social media and learning. So I guess that's why I do stay optimistic that these truths, these realities will all get exposed, and they won't, the people won't allow it as we continue to see it.
Sure. Robert, any thoughts?
One thing that I've seen a lot of recently is a certain level of despair on our side, let's call it, around the inability to move the most rigid, extreme, angry right-wingers. We're not going to move them. and facts are not going to move them. Partly it's because the separation has become tribal, and you don't turn on your tribe. Now, that doesn't mean we should give up. There are many, many people we can influence, we can affect, but the hardcore tribal, frankly, haters and racists, and also the people who the system has chewed up and thrown out, the corporates, the money, those people, unfortunately, the trauma and the pain is so great, we, with all of our skills, are not going to be able to move them to see the light. But there's a whole lot of other people. And those are the ones that, see these bookshelves behind me. Half the books are about how to influence people and how do you get people to change their mind and what are the ways to message. It's complicated, it's challenging, but again, at Brave New Films, what we try to do is put a face on policy, put a human being that you can connect to, that you can relate to. Dr. King had children go out and face the dogs because he knew that that was a way to reach and move large parts of the population, and he was right.
For sure. So we've got a lot of folks in the comments just making wonderful, applauding, talking about progressive prosecutors, not so much questions. And we see you all and we thank you all for your input. Any last questions? I'm gonna put it right here. I'm gonna just have a little second to ask anybody for a question for Senator Robert. Okay. Before we close it out here.
To touch on what Robert just mentioned, though, I was going to just say, like, one of the things with, always film the police or this content is really to show the people who've never seen this kind of stuff and wouldn't, right, see this kind of police abuse given mainstream media and all that stuff, and show and then show people who really only experience maybe police abuse or have that, to show me go up to cops and just have, conversation. Oh, because I get that a lot. Wow, you can just ask a cop something? They just think you're talking to a cop, it's really that bad. So goes to just show, like, just showing that kind of two sides to it all, to these different communities.
Yeah, I would add to what Sennett has said. Some of you may have seen it. There've been a series of articles recently around some of the cop murders where the press has collected the statements that police make right after they've killed somebody. And they're out and out provable lies. And then a week later or a month later or several months later, the truth comes out and the lies are exposed. And that's not an accident. The number of police PR people, your tax dollars, paying for tons of PR people on the staff to help sanitize and try to protect some of the horrors that have been going on. And that's something that I hope we'll be able to take on in the future.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Robert. So no more questions, simply lots of comments. We've got, let's just wrap it up. So Sennett, can you just tell us, in what ways can folks get involved? So not just contribute to Always for the People, right, but how can they get involved with your work?
I would say we're constantly organizing. What Robert just mentioned, the LAPD specifically gets millions of dollars in PR. All of these departments have a ton of money. And so we actually get that phone call from the families that say, hey, my son was killed by the police, and on Monday, they're going to put out all these details and a video of what happened. But we have the camera footage that shows what really happened. Can you get this to the public first? We'll then organize rallies. We've organized stuff for these people, their loved ones' birthdays. we continue to advocate. So what can people do? I would say stay in touch on our Instagram. There are definite actions that we do all across all across the country. In fact, in September, we are in the infancy stages of planning a caravan to Washington, D.C. with families all over the country. Jacob Blake Sr., he's with Families United. He came and is like, hey, let's get families all over the country and drive. So we've actually been working on that. So if you follow on Instagram, you will find something to support. We also have a lot of calls to action. So if you go to our link tree on Mr. Checkpoint, there's a couple of things on there where you can learn more about these issues and send emails to the district attorneys, the attorney generals, and more. So definitely some ways to take action in that capacity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sennett. And, certainly keep us all posted on this trip to Washington because we are very interested and want to support in any way we can. And Robert, why don't you take us out? How can folks continue to support Brave New Films and the work that Brave New Films is doing?
Well, first, again, I want to thank you, Carmen, for moderating this, and Sennett for the work that he's continuing to do. And just a reminder, what Sennett is doing, he's dealing with death and murder on a regular basis. And it's death and murder coming from the police, and it's death and murder for often innocent folks whose only crime is the color of their skin. That is tough work. That is hard and that is painful. And the more help and support we can give him, the better. For Brave New Films, it's easy. You see Carmen in front of you. She's running our screening program. She's accessible. She's available. If you haven't done a screening, she'll show you how. We've got study guides and we've got reflection guides. So if you want to do it in your home, great. The easiest way is to go where there's already an audience. Where is there already an audience? Schools and faith communities. They need something to bring people together, to discuss, to debate, even to disagree with. Some of our screenings around the military industrial stuff, we've shown our drone film at military academies and had extraordinary responses. We've shown the voter suppression film in all different kinds of communities. But it doesn't exist without all of you. That's the only way it exists. It's the only way we can keep going. And frankly, it's the only way we can make them available for free, by showing our wonderful funders, foundations, and individuals, here are these screenings, here is where they're happening, and here are the comments of people who are screening and deciding to take action because they've seen a film. They're taking clips, they're putting it on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, any place there are parts of the film or full-length films available. And it really does take a village, and we hope you'll all be part of that village.
Thank you, Robert. And we are the village of advocacy for equality across the board. And especially right now, we're talking about racial equality, especially in the criminal legal system. So show up for your citizens, your fellow citizens. We've got free films, free. This is why we do this. You can just sign up, get the films, get the materials, and have the conversations. And follow Mr. Checkpoint on Instagram because he's got some stuff that can go out immediately. And while we're making a film. So please, 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 please support both of these wonderful organizations. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Carmen.